Hello, everyone, and welcome to For Love and Money. This week is kind of special because it's the start of our first two-parter podcast. I had so much fun talking to A.E Radley that I had to do it for 40 minutes. So we're going to split it into this week, and you'll hear the follow-up in 2 weeks. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lesbian Talk Shows For Love and Money. I'm your host, Rae Magden, and I am so excited about our guest today. We actually started talking for a good 5 minutes before we started recording, and then we realized we should probably be sharing this with our audience, right? I have author extraordinaire A.E Radley. Thank you so much for joining me this morning, or afternoon for you.
Yeah, afternoon for me. Thank you for having me. As I was saying before we started recording, I love this podcast. I'm so surprised when I come across someone who doesn't listen to it. I'm always like, you've got to listen to it because as much as we like talking about the craft, there is the publishing and the business side of things as well. And I think a lot of people struggle, and it's important to share that information.
I am exceptionally flattered. And you are a collector of information, I believe, which is why I originally reached out for you to be on the podcast. You basically did a huge multi-year survey now. This is year 2, right? Of the buying habits of Sapphic readers.
Yeah. I've got 2 years worth of results. I've got the third year running now to get results, which I decided to run it for a little bit longer this time to try to get more information. So yeah, I've got sort of 2 and a bit years of information. But yeah, it's been fascinating, and I've always worked in marketing. I run my own London marketing agency for years, and I know how important sort of facts and figures are. I'm one of those authors who you don't hear about very often, who kind of looks at the business side and the publishing side and definitely the marketing side. So I kept hearing everyone talking about, oh, you must do this or you mustn't do that. No one will ever pay that. Everyone expects this. And I thought, where's this information coming from? How accurate is it? So I thought I'd just do a survey and find out. So yeah, as I say, 2 years of results so far, and the third year sort of on the way.
Okay, so let's talk about the first year first. What kinds of questions did you ask, and what results did you get that surprised you and perhaps challenged some of your own preconceptions about the business side of marketing sapphic fiction?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you say Sapphic fiction, because I mean, one of the things I always look at is how things change as well. So when I first did the survey in 2017, people were identifying, mainly sort of 80% of people were identifying as lesbian or gay. That dropped last year to 70%, and with the results so far this year, it's down to 68%. So that's many more people identifying as pan, bi, ace, and many other things. So that's been really interesting for me, because I recently took the term lesbian romance author off of my books because I'm bisexual, so it doesn't cover me. So I was like, why do I keep like my books go in the lesbian romance category in Amazon. I can't change that. That's fine. But I need to check myself on how I'm using language, because it doesn't apply to me. I mean, I'm married to a lesbian, but I think I'm erasing myself. I'm doing it to me, and I'm complaining when other people do it. So, it's really interesting to see that I'm not the only person who's thinking that way and is changing their own language.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a bi woman too, so it's really nice to talk to someone else in the business who is also bi. My partner is trans, so yeah, that's a whole side of the business that I try to lean into.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried. I find it quite hard, because the second you start, like, especially if you go to Amazon or any of the publishers, and you have bisexual, you're usually into men straight away. Usually two men and a woman, or something like that. Or there's a lot of sort of the bare chests and whatever, and a lot of bisexual women back out of that, and it's very hard because obviously the gay fiction market is much bigger than the women loving woman fiction market. So it's hard to advertise, especially when so many people are like, oh, you mean lesbian? No, I mean, and like the actual name of the survey's changed, because it used to be the Lesbian and Bi Women Fiction Survey. And this year I decided to change it to the WLW Fiction Questionnaire. And I had so many people go, what's that? And I was like, oh no, honey, that's you.
Well, it's a chance to like widen the circle, and I don't think widening the circle is ever a bad thing, you know?
Absolutely no. And I think there's that question that, I mean, when I first started writing lesbian fiction, as it's known, and I went into like lesbian fiction Facebook groups, and someone said, oh well, I'm bisexual, or God forbid I'm a man and I read lesbian fiction. Just the pushback was incredible. So I just waded in there, go, well, I'm bisexual, and all this tumbleweed kind of blew by. Like everyone went, you're what? Literally, like I said, I'm a murderer, and I was like, oh, okay. I didn't realize that there was that stigma attached to it, but that's changed so much, sort of in the last sort of 2-3 years that I've been publishing. And I'm really happy with that because I think it was one of those things that, needed to be a conversation. And I think a lot of people were a bit shy about having that conversation. But I mean, the results of my survey and just sort of, talking to people in general, I've noticed that's changed a lot and it's such a positive thing. It got a long way to go, but we're getting there.
Well, I appreciate you doing this and fighting this fight alongside me. So thank you. Can we talk a little bit about numbers? Your survey was is very specific about what prices consumers are willing to pay for ebooks. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely changed. It's gone right down. Yeah, in 2017, the sort of cost that people would expect to pay for an ebook was $10. In 2018, that dropped to the bracket of between $2.99 and $5.99, and it stayed the same in 2019. So it's literally dropped from $10 to between sort of $3 and $6. So that's quite the drop.
What do you think? Just not that I want you to speculate too much, but because I know you're a data person, but what do you think might be contributing to that?
I think it's indie authors charging a lot less. I think in the past, sort of, if you think sort of 5, 6, 7 years ago, you had a couple of brave indie authors who managed to, navigate Amazon's system at the time or whoever's system at the time and sell their books. And then you had publishers, and publishers have always charged more. Now you have cheaper publishers coming in, so publishers who are charging a bit less than the big names, and you have loads of indie authors. And I think people are actually finding out that you can pick up an indie author book for $2.99 and it's good. It's been edited, it's got a good cover, it's got a great story, it's worth the same as a traditionally published book. And I think as more and more people come across that, more and more people are saying, well, what's the choice here? Why would I pay, $10 for a book from one of the big publishers when I know I can get a decent book from an indie author for much, much, much less? So I personally think that's why.
Well, let's talk a little bit about quality too, because you asked the users of your survey to rate the quality of lesbian fiction, sapphic fiction as a whole. And what did you find with that?
Yeah, it's been very changeable. I mean, it's kind of stays the same throughout the 3 years of results, but generally, people are pretty happy with the editing quality and with the cover quality when you look at those questions. But when you look at the answers, like the free form answers, I have a question where I say, "Did you?" Or have you ever returned a book? And if so, why? And I have a free form question at the end, which is if you feel there's any changes that need to be made to the fiction market. So that's always interesting because that's where people can free form their ideas. And in those consistently comes up people complaining about editing, quality of the book, quality of audiobooks is coming in now as well. People are complaining about when they say they've returned a product, they're not just returning about sort of ebooks now, it's also audiobooks. And that's where I see so many people complaining about quality, and even saying quality sliding in some of the bigger publishing houses and things like that. So and obviously that's just one person, but when you have many one people all saying, oh, I've returned this book due to quality, due to editing, due to problems with the cover, due to problems with the paperback or something like that, when you have many people, you realize there is a bit of an issue in the industry.
So you asked under what threshold a reader would return something they had bought um, because of quality issues, and what did you find?
Well, it's funny actually because in that question, have you ever returned a book, and if so, why? Some people were just saying, I returned it because I didn't like it. Like literally, they just didn't like the story. And in the first year, in 2017, I had huge numbers of people saying, oh yeah, I just returned it because I didn't like it. I didn't get into it. I didn't like the main character, things like that. And I thought that was just mind blowing because if I go onto Netflix and I watch a show and I didn't like the main character, I don't phone Netflix up and go, yeah, I'd like my monthly subscription back because I just didn't understand why she did that. You made an entertainment decision and you suck it up. But apparently there are people out there who go, I just didn't like the choices that character made, so I'm going to return this book. And that happened again in 2018, but not so much in 2019. I'm glad it's drifting away because I think, whether you agreed with what the protagonist was doing or not, you've read the book. So, if you didn't like it, you should suck that up. But then there are people who are returning books genuinely because there were editing issues. I mean, some people are saying like there's 3 or 4 editing issues on every page, grammar issues, spelling issues, and things like that. And obviously that's just completely unacceptable.
You're listening to The Lesbian Talk Show. TheLesbianTalkShow.com, your hub of podcast information.
So you also had a question about the blurbs and the covers and what helps sell a new author potentially to a prospective buyer. What did you discover? What draws new readers in?
I'd say the most important thing is the blurb. There's an interesting question where I ask people to rate out of a segment of things, so out of author, blurb, price, cover, and publisher, to rate them in order of importance. And what that does is the chart actually gives me, basically, it tells me how important they think each thing is. So that gives me 2 results. It gives me a result of from most important to least important, and also from sort of least important to most important, and that doesn't always add up. But what that found is the most important thing people thought of was an author, then the blurb, then the price, then the cover, then the publisher. So I think that was really interesting that, you've got blurb, the second one there. So say if you're an unknown author, your blurb is incredibly important. And on the other spectrum of that, for the least important, the least important, if you like, is the publisher, then the cover, then the price, then the author, then the blurb. So that's actually switching those 2 at the top on the most important scale around. So from author to blurb to blurb to author. So again, that blurb is coming in really high there, and cover is still the second least important. So I think that's really important as well. I mean, I think, I love having a good cover. It's really important to me, and I think it is very, very good. I think people don't necessarily rate them as much when they're looking on Amazon or whatever. They're more likely to read the blurb, judging from these results anyway.
I'm a little surprised that publisher came in so low, but that kind of tracks with some of the other stuff you've discovered about advertising methods that people hear about books through. Between the years, I guess author newsletters became way more popular, and publishing newsletters, people were saying they didn't hear about new releases through them as much. Why do you think that changes?
I think where publishers are struggling to know how to market and how to market many, many books. I mean, if you look at some of our biggest publishing houses, they have a huge number of books and authors. How can they possibly manage everything? So I'm traditionally published in the past. I've been published with one of the big publishers and then became indie. And I know from that experience and from speaking to other authors that I think nearly all publishing houses, and not just within our genre, ask authors to manage their own marketing now. They'll help and they'll assist in certain ways, but they're not going to do a huge amount for the marketing of your book. So I think that's simply a matter of more authors appearing on social media, and more authors are getting newsletters and taking more control of their own marketing. So I think as there's been more authors doing things for marketing, newsletters and such, that's where readers are thinking, oh, I can actually connect directly to the authors I know. Like I say, I mean, people were saying that publisher was the least important. There's another thing I've got where it says, are you willing to pay more for books by a certain author? And 61% said yes. The same question, are you willing to pay more for books by certain publishers? Only 10% say yes. So I think from a reader's point of view, they're going to be a lot more loyal to an author than they are to a publisher. And obviously a publisher newsletter will have many, many different books by many different people. And they won't have any personal information about any of those authors either. I mean, I blog quite a lot about sort of personal things. And in my newsletter, I'll talk about just me, or me and maybe someone who I'm featuring. or my wife, who's also an author. So, I'll talk more about other things and not just, I've got this book out. And that's what most publisher newsletters are. So I think people are kind of falling out of love with that style of marketing.
I guarantee you whatever you blog about is not as personal as what's on my blog. So, all right. Anyway, people are connecting with authors on social media more than ever, but at the same time, they're still complaining that they don't know where to find these books and they don't know about new releases. Why do you think that is?
Oh, I don't know. I have to say, this is one that really startles me. Every single survey, all 3 surveys I've done, people are saying that they feel that all books could be marketed more. And yet they always complain that there's too much social media spam in as well. But yet there is this thing that, books just aren't being advertised enough. And I can see that in a way, because I think especially if you connect to all the authors, and the authors have grown and grown and grown, if you connect to all the authors on, say, Facebook, for example, and you're connected to your family and your friends and your work colleagues, you are going to miss things. And I think a lot of authors are guilty of the, I've got a book out, it's 9 a.m, I'm going to go in every Facebook group and I'm going to put the link and I'm going to put it on my wall, I'm going to put it on my group, and then I'm going to go and have a cup of tea because I'm done. And I think if someone misses that window, that's it. They don't see it. So I think there's a sort of lesson for authors to spread out your marketing and to talk about things over, days and certainly over hours, not always at the same time of day. But yeah, I think it's just a difficulty in that our market's growing, which is great, but is also a bit of a challenge for us as well.
Ooh, the 9 a.m. post everywhere and then done. That's a mistake. No, you want to do it over.
I see that so often.
No!
I hate it. I see people do it and I kind of want to reach out and go, no, but you don't want to be that person, do you? You don't want to be that, I've got some advice for you. It just, no.
Well, that's why they should listen to the podcast, because then you would know you have to do it over a series of not only days, but weeks and months, and you have to pad it with recommending other people and also personal anecdotes and or other media so that people don't think you're just there to sell one specific book to them.
Absolutely. We see more and more people doing this, though, the drive-by, where people they don't even say anything. They just put the link to Amazon and they're gone. And I just sit there going, what? It's like, that creates a bad rapport with you and any potential reader. It's like you couldn't even be bothered to write the words, here's my book. You just literally hit the link. You waited for Facebook to go, there's your picture, hit submit, and then you ran. And I think that's the worst style because, one of the things that many big authors talk about is turning readers into fans. And I think that's one thing you're never going to do. You're never going to turn a reader into a fan by just doing this kind of like drive-by. There you go. There's my book. Go buy it. Bye.
So I love your survey, and we'll probably jump back to it at some point. But I want to talk a little bit about you and your marketing strategies and your books. First of all, I have to say your website is very impressive because I went there and I bought a book. Like within 2 minutes.
Yay!
And I'm I love buying books, but I usually take my time to think about it a little more. So the fact that I bought one so quickly was kind of impressive. How did you set up your website? What do you think works about it? And why do you think I got sucked into the honeypot?
I think with my website, it's been a while in sort of creating it and thinking about it. Everything I do in marketing, and this is something I learned sort of, from studying and working in marketing. Everything I do with marketing myself is to look at the user journey. And I think that's something hugely important that so many authors don't do. Like with the drive-by, someone who's gone into a Facebook group and just dumped a link and walked off. They haven't thought about how that looks to potential readers. So, to me as a potential reader, I look at that and go, well, you don't care. You've just hit a link and gone. Whereas if someone's constructed a message and actually said, hi, this is my debut novel, it's about this, and actually, drawn me in, all of these things are stops along the way of my user journey towards potentially getting me to buy that book. So when I look at my own website, I look at trying to make it a little bit more interesting. On all of my book pages and all the individual book pages, I try to have something at the top which almost mentions which trope it is, because I generally write by trope. So I generally try to, get people drawn in straight away by saying, like, if you like an age gap romance, this is an age gap romance, because that's not really something you're going to put in the book blurb. Although you should probably start, to be honest, because I think a lot of people do just buy, they go age gap, buy, or whatever trope it is they like. But yeah, that's one of the things I sort of try and do, or try and look at how a website user is coming into the site and what they're seeing.
About tropes, like, we are on the same wavelength. I had a podcast with Hildred Billings a few weeks ago, and it was like, holy crap, tropes are not a bad thing, they're a good thing. They're a selling point for your book a lot of the time. So
yeah, I really agree. I think they are so important. I mean, that's how I choose what I read. I don't read a huge amount. I'm a terrible author. I don't really read a great deal of other people's books. I wish I could. I never have time. But when I do finally pick a book, it's based on a trope. I see sort of like age gap, office romance. Oh, yeah, just put it in front of me. I'll read it. No problem. And that's all I need to know. I don't need to know her name and where she works. She's an advertising exec. No doubt she's an advertising exec. But, I don't need to know all of that. I'm like, yeah, you got me at age gap romance in an office. Fine. Let's read it. You don't need to worry about the rest. So I think there's a stigma to it. And I think it's a real shame, because I think people could sell a lot more books if they just embrace the fact that they've probably written a book with a couple of tropes in it, and they could probably market it with that.
Tropes build fiction. I mean, you just have to do them well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's so many. I think you can look at a lot of books, a lot of like best-selling books in our genre, and you could pick them up and kind of like pull out a decent trope or two and say, that's basically what this is built on. And that's what people, if you look at like, especially in our genre, if you look at television programs that like really get off the ground, there's generally a trope or two within them. And fan fiction as well, which is obviously where the whole, trope thing really shines, is where people can just like tag it with a certain trope and you go, yep, that's what I want to read.
Do you come from the fan fiction universe as well?
I do, yeah.
Do you think that's why we think tropes are a good thing and not a bad thing, or an immature thing?
I think so, yeah. I think it's amazing how many people in our genre have no idea what fan fiction even is, even some of the authors. And I'm stunned. I was on a panel at ELCON, a convention over here last August, with other authors, and they were like, fan fiction? And I've heard of this, but I know I should know. I was like, what do you mean you've heard of this? It's like it's such a big thing for us. And, Bold Strokes books kind of originated through Xena fan fiction. So how there can still be authors who go, what, fan fiction? And yeah, there is a bit of a, some people do laugh a bit when they think about fan fiction, but I think it's hugely important and hugely influential. And I know our market grows because of fan fiction, because people suddenly go, oh, there are books like this. They're like real books. I think, young kids who read fan fiction and their parents go to them, oh, you're not really reading. They can actually go into a bookstore and actually pick up a book. It's very similar to the things they read in fan fiction, and have the proof and say, no, this is a real thing. Many people like it. It's commercially viable. Here's a professionally printed book, which is very similar to the things I read online.
Absolutely. I mean, that's where my audience comes from, is literally fan fiction. And I'll tell you what, I'm doing a panel that I proposed for the Golden Crown Literary Society convention this year, and it's all about fan fiction and what it is and how it connects to lesfic.
Absolutely. And I think it's really funny because when I, like, my first published book was fan fiction, and it was a sort of it was an AU and it was converted to a book. And it was really funny because I had this kind of like, for about 6 months before and after launch, I had this real split in audience. All of my fan fiction people were going like, my God, they publish this stuff? And what? There are other books in this genre, like having no idea that lesbian fiction existed. And then they had all my like lesbian fiction people who were going, it's from where? From fan fiction? Or what's that? AO where? And it was just so bizarre. I was like, if you two people could just connect and talk, you'd have so much in common. And the lesbian fiction market would grow so big if you could just, bring all those people across.
Well, I'm trying. I'm doing my part.
I'm trying as well. Oh, I keep banging away. I'm like, no, this isn't anything to do with Once Upon a Time and Swan Queen, but it's still a book you might enjoy. Please.
Hi, this is Rae again with the Lesbian Talk Shows for Love and Money. We're going to end the conversation here so we can bring the second half of it to you in 2 weeks, where we talk about fan fiction, about conventions, about marketing, about tropes, about all sorts of really cool stuff. So I hope that you will tune in 2 weeks for the follow-up, and that you'll check us out on Patreon, where you can support the Lesbian Talk Show's endeavors to get more podcasts like this. And check out the Lesbian Talk Show's Facebook group, where you can discuss current episodes, suggest future episodes, and connect with all of us here who are making these podcasts for you to enjoy. Thank you, and have a great 2 weeks.